I guess the best place to start is right after my youngest moved out. That's when I decided to move into the city. I mean, I'd been talking about it for years, right? My kids always teased me about it. Mom, you're too old to chase that. Big city vibe. Or, why not just get a condo in a suburb? But I craved something new, and that's how I ended up in the old building on 8th Street. I'd saved up enough to cover the deposit and 2 months' rent. People warned me the neighborhood was transitional, which is basically code for watch your damn back. But it was cheap, near a decent bus line, and the unit had these massive windows overlooking the street. I wanted a sense of life outside my window. Cars, people, maybe some noise to keep the loneliness at bay. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit on edge the first night. The building had a stale odor in the hallways, like old cigarettes and sour mop water. My unit itself was okay, small, with battered laminate floors and a kitchen that looked like it had seen better days in the 90s. But I didn't mind. It was mine. My kids were grown and gone. This was my shot at something fresh. I remember standing by the window, looking out at a street lamp flickering across from the liquor store. A group of teenagers argued on the corner, and somewhere down the block, I heard a dog barking. It was a far cry from the quiet nights I'd known in the suburbs, but it was good. It felt alive. That first night, I didn't see anyone lurking in the stairwell. Not yet. Nothing actually terrifying happened. But if I'm honest, I was restless anyway. Couldn't sleep. Paced around, half excited, half nervous. If I'd known what was coming, I'd have never set foot in that building. But you always say that in hindsight, right? So a few days passed in relative peace. I started to settle in. I got a job at a local copy shop. I know, not super glamorous, but it kept my bills paid. The staff were cool people, mostly younger than me, and they joked about how I reminded them of their moms. "Your mom swears like a sailor?" I'd fire back, laughing. Because, yeah, I drop an F-bomb more often than most folks my age. The weirdness began on my 4th night. I'd just gotten home from a late shift. It was almost midnight. I was exhausted, but I decided to swing by the mailbox, in the lobby first. I walked down the hall, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed a figure standing below on the landing. The building had these harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look jaundiced, and they cast a long shadow up the wall. He was young, maybe early 20s, or younger. He wore a ragged hoodie, torn jeans, and scuffed sneakers. And he was just standing there looking up. His face was all angles in the fluorescent glow, deep shadows around his eyes. I paused, and for a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. Then I forced a polite smile and said, "Hey there." He didn't say a damn thing, didn't even nod. Just turned around and walked out the front door, letting it slam behind him. The security door's loud clang made me jump. I tried to laugh it off. Probably some local kid, maybe in trouble, maybe lost, maybe stoned out of his mind. But it stuck with me. He'd looked haunted, if that makes any sense. Eyes too old for his face. I shrugged it off. People have crap days. Maybe he'd just broken up with someone or gotten fired from a job. It's a big city. Stuff like that happens all the time. That's what I told myself as I grabbed my mail and trudged back up to my unit. If only it had ended there. Over the next week, I saw him more frequently. Always just a glimpse. On the stairwell, in the laundry room, once even loitering by my door. Each time he'd vanish if I tried to approach or say hello. It unsettled me, but I'm no stranger to folks down on their luck or living rough. I grew up in a rough neighborhood myself, so I tried to keep an open mind. Maybe he was crashing with a friend in the building. One night, though, something happened that I couldn't brush aside so easily. I'd just gotten home and realized I'd forgotten my phone in the car. Annoyed, I headed back down the stairs. Partway down, the power flickered off. I mean, everything. Lights, that faint hum of the building's ancient ventilation system. Gone. In an instant. For a few seconds, I stood there in near darkness. The only light was the faint glow from outside shining through the glass door at the bottom of the stairs. My heart started pounding. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I whipped around, but all I could see was a silhouette. Someone on the landing above me. I froze. "Hello?" My voice echoed up the stairwell. The footsteps didn't stop, but they shifted, like whoever it was had moved closer. Then, as quickly as they went out, the lights flickered back on. And the silhouette, it was him. The young man from before, just 2 steps above me now, staring down at me with these wide, hollow eyes. He was so close I could smell the faint odor of sweat and something earthy, like damp soil. We locked eyes for half a second. Then he darted past me, practically shoulder-checking me into the railing. I stumbled. "What the hell?" I yelled. But he just kept running, down the rest of the stairs and out the door. I heard it slam again, that same clang from before. I should have called the cops, maybe. But what would I say? Hey, an unarmed kid is running around my building and he's weirding me out. No, he hasn't threatened me, but I'm spooked. Great, they'd really rush over for that. I chalked it up to random city craziness. Looking back, I wish I'd pressed the building. "Manager Moore," I'd told him once or twice. "I keep seeing this kid. Do you know who he is?" And all I got was a shrug. "We get squatters sometimes, or people visiting a friend. Let me know if he bothers you." Real helpful, right? I tried to settle into a routine. Work, come home, microwave something questionable, watch TV, fall asleep, repeat. But then little things started happening in my apartment, stuff I initially blamed on my own forgetful mind. I'd wake up in the morning, and the chairs at my tiny dining table would be shifted, or the window in the living room would be cracked open even though I was sure I'd locked it before bed. One time, I found a small comb on my couch, one of those cheap black plastic ones. I don't use combs like that. I prefer a brush for my hair. I had no clue where it came from. I tossed it in the trash and tried not to think about it. Another time, I walked into my bedroom and saw footprints on the floor, bare footprints in a streak of dust near the corner. Mine? I checked. No, the size was off, and they were damp, as if someone with slightly wet feet had been standing there. My chest tightened when I realized that I hadn't used the shower recently. No reason for water anywhere near my bedroom. I grabbed a rag, wiped them up, and convinced myself it was from a spill or a weird shadow. Denial can be a strong drug. Still, I started double-checking my locks at night, even propping a chair under the door handle like some cheap horror movie trick. Part of me felt ridiculous. Part of me felt safer. Then, I found the first message. I'd been tidying up my nightstand when I saw it. Someone had scraped letters into the wood. It said, "Wake up." The scratches looked fresh. The wood splintered. My entire body tensed. I traced the grooves with my fingertip. It didn't feel like random vandalism. It felt directed at me. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with a bat in my lap, a reading light on, the sound of sirens drifting in from outside. Every little noise from the hallway made me jump. Around 2 a.m., I went to the kitchen for some water and glimpsed a silhouette at the door's peephole. I nearly choked, but when I pressed my eye to the peephole to see outside, there was nobody there. I'm sure at this point you're thinking, "Marlene, why the hell didn't you just move?" That's exactly what my daughter asked when I told her about the footprints. Truth is, I didn't want to run. I'd signed a lease, spent my savings. Plus, it felt like giving in, you know? Still, I had to do something. so I started patrolling the hallways to see if I could catch this kid in the act, or whoever the hell was messing with me. A few days later, I found him again, leaning in the corner near the elevator. This time, I was determined to confront him. When he saw me, he didn't bolt. He just stood there, blinking. In the harsh hallway light, I noticed how thin he was, how shaky. Up close, his face looked battered with old bruises and scars. I wanted to help him, but fear pulsed in my gut. I took a careful step closer. "Listen," I said, voice hushed. "I don't know who you are, but you need to stop coming into my apartment. If you're hungry or need something, just tell me, but you can't keep..." He shook his head, eyes darting from my face to the floor. Still silent. Then he tapped his ear, and I realized maybe he was trying to indicate he couldn't hear me. Deaf? Hard of hearing? I lowered my voice anyway. "Hey, do you live here?" Nothing but that haunted stare. Then he raised his hand. His nails were ragged, and he started tracing something against the wall with his finger. It wasn't precise, just a shape, a rectangle with a symbol inside. I couldn't make sense of it. He looked desperate, like he was trying to communicate something urgent. I fished out my phone, opened a blank note, and offered it to him. He pressed his fingers to the screen, but he just ended up pressing random letters, like he didn't know how to type. A pang of guilt stabbed me. I realized I might have been dealing with a mentally ill or traumatized person. Footsteps approached from down the hall. The building manager. The young man's eyes widened. He shoved past me again, sprinting, for the stairs before the manager could turn the corner. I was left panting, phone in hand. The manager gave me a once-over, asked if I was okay. I told him I was trying to talk to that guy, that maybe he needed help. He just shrugged again. "Lady, you gotta be careful. People around here can be dangerous. I'll keep an eye out, I guess." He was gone in a second, leaving me more unsettled than before. Things took a sharp turn for the worse the following week. I kept hearing these muffled noises at night, like a squeak or a scuffle in my living room. In the morning, I'd find small changes again. My remote on the floor, or the curtains drawn, when I swore I'd left them open. I got paranoid and started searching for hidden cameras, half laughing at how ridiculous I must have looked. Didn't find any. But I did find another message. This time, it was on the back of my bathroom mirror, scratched into the silver backing. I only noticed it because I was cleaning the edge. A single word: remember. That struck me in a weird place. Remember? Remember what? My childhood? A secret? It was around then I started having nightmares about my old neighborhood, a place I hadn't thought about in years. Scenes of me hiding in a closet while someone pounded on the door, screaming my name. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, the caretaker's face from my childhood swirling in my head. Mr. Hernandez was his name, or at least that's what we called him. He was the landlord in the building where my parents rented a tiny, roach-infested apartment. A mean bastard who used to bark at the kids to stay quiet, to keep out of the hallways. He'd catch us playing and punish us with forced chores, scrubbing floors, picking up trash. The memory of him made my skin crawl. I pushed those thoughts aside. It was ancient history. Then one evening, I was sorting through a box of old papers in my closet, looking for an insurance file. Tucked in a folder, I found an old Polaroid from my childhood. It was me, maybe 9 or 10, and a boy I barely recognized, skinny, with a bruise on his cheek. We stood outside a grimy building, and in the background, leaning by the entrance, was Mr. Hernandez glowering. The Polaroid had no caption, no date, but I felt an ache in my gut looking at it. That boy in the picture. There was a resemblance to the man who'd been lurking around. The shape of his eyes, the haunted expression. Could that be him? It didn't seem possible. So many years had gone by. My head spun with questions. Was this some bizarre coincidence? Or had this boy from my childhood found me decades later? As if to confirm my fears, I found another note that night, taped to the inside of my fridge. How it got there, I had no idea. It said, "We're still here." And beneath the words was that same rectangle shape with some scribbled symbol inside. My skin prickled. The corners of my vision pulsed. I locked every door, every window, texted my daughter telling her I loved her, then spent the night on the couch with the lights blazing. By now, I was unraveling. The final straw came on a Tuesday evening. I was heading to the trash chute at the end of the hall when I heard something in the storage room, a muffled whimper. The door was ajar, and the smell of mold and damp concrete wafted out. Against my better judgment, I poked my head in. The space was cramped, stacked with boxes and old furniture. And sitting there, huddled in a corner, was the young man. His arms were wrapped around his knees, his face streaked with tears. On the wall behind him, scrawled in black marker, were words I recognized from the notes. "Remember. Wake up. We're still here." He must have been writing them. But why? I took a cautious step forward, heart pounding. "It's okay," I said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you." He lifted his face, tears pooling in his eyes, and slowly, painstakingly, he mouthed 2 words. "He's here." I felt my breath catch. He motioned me closer, trembling. Before I could respond, the overhead light in the storage room clicked off, plunging us into darkness. He let out a whimper. Then the door slammed shut. I scrambled for the handle, but it wouldn't budge, locked from the outside. I banged on it, swearing, yelling for help. In the darkness, I could feel him pressing against me, his breath ragged. We were trapped, and all I could think was, who the hell locked us in? Minutes crawled by. It might have been hours for all I knew. Finally, the door rattled open, revealing the silhouette of a tall figure in the hallway light. He stepped into the storage room, and I saw his face. Mr. Hernandez. Not older, not changed, exactly the same as I remembered, except for deeper lines around his eyes and a slight stoop in his posture. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. I'd thought this man was long gone, maybe dead. But he was right here. He stared at us, a slow smile curling on his lips. "You too. It's been a long time," he said in a voice that crawled under my skin. He had a ring of keys in one hand. The young man cowered, pressing himself against the wall. "You found her," Hernandez said to the boy, like it was a job well done. "You never could say no to me, could you?" My mouth went dry. I barely managed to ask, "What do you want from me?" His laugh echoed in that cramped room. The same thing I wanted back then: obedience, respect, and my secrets kept. He stared at me, eyes gleaming with some twisted satisfaction. "But you forgot, didn't you? Moved on, had a family, left it all behind. Well, we can't have that." He kicked the door shut and flicked the light off again. Panic flared in my chest. I heard the boy let out a choked sob. Then came a clang as Hernandez locked the door from the inside, sealing all 3 of us in. My world spun. I groped blindly at the darkness, trying to find anything. A weapon, a piece of furniture. I don't remember much of the minutes that followed, just flashes of violence and the taste of iron in my mouth. Hernandez grabbed me by the hair, hissed something about how I'd never been grateful for his kindness growing up. Said I was a mouthy little brat who needed reminding. The boy tried to intervene, flailing in the dark, but Hernandez shoved him so hard he crashed into a stack of boxes. They tumbled, caving in with a sickening thud. For a moment, my mind spiraled back to a memory I'd buried long ago. I was 9, locked in a basement storage room with a battered boy. Mr. Hernandez had told us we needed to learn discipline, forced us to do menial tasks around the building, threatened to hurt our families if we told anyone. We'd been kids, powerless. That battered boy had been my friend, though I can't recall his name. We'd escaped one day, just ran away from that building. Or so I'd thought. I guess he never fully got away. It's horrifying to realize you repressed something so huge. But all those cryptic notes, the footprints, the comb, the scratched messages, were the boy's attempts to jog my memory, to warn me that Hernandez was back, that he hadn't let go of his old cruelty. In that pitch-black storage room, I felt Hernandez's grip slip for a moment. I lunged sideways, groping for a hard object to swing. My hand closed around a broken table leg. I swung wildly, bashing it into his side. He doubled over, cursing in Spanish. I didn't hold back. I cracked him again, this time across the shoulder, and I heard him yell. My arms shook. Part of me was absolutely terrified. Part of me was furious, like decades of fear and shame were boiling up, begging me to fight back. The next thing I knew, the boy was crawling up behind Hernandez and yanking the keys from his belt. He jammed them at me, his hands quivering so badly he nearly dropped them. I fumbled for the lock in the dark, found it, twisted until the latch clicked. Then we threw the door open, and we stumbled into the hallway like a pair of fugitives. Should have run. I should have called the cops. But I saw a fire alarm by the doorway, and in my panic, all I could think was sound the alarm, get people out here. Someone will help. So I pulled it. The alarm blared, shrill and punishing, echoing off every wall. Hernandez staggered out of the storage room, glaring at me with pure hatred. For a second, I thought he was going to charge me. But then neighbors started poking their heads out of their apartments, alarmed by the siren. Hernandez froze, glared around. He seemed to realize there were too many witnesses. He spat on the ground, shot me a final vicious look, and took off down the stairwell with surprising speed for a man his age. I collapsed on the floor, the boy beside me. My vision swam with tears and the flicker of overhead lights. People rushed over, some with confusion, others with concern. A few recognized me as the nice lady who always helps with groceries, but no one seemed to know the boy. The building manager arrived, looking stunned by the chaos. I pointed down the stairs and gasped. He attacked us. Call the police. My voice cracked. The cops showed up. They took statements, descriptions. They looked skeptical about an older man who exactly matched Hernandez's face from my childhood recollection. The building manager insisted no one named Hernandez worked or lived there. They took the boy aside and tried to talk to him, but he was nonverbal, trembling. He scribbled something on a notepad. He took me here to find her. The cops didn't understand what it meant. They asked if I wanted to go to the hospital, but I shook my head. I just wanted to get away from that building. In the weeks since, I've learned more. The boy, his name is Rafi, was from my old neighborhood. We were both kids in the same building. After I fled with my family, Rafi apparently never escaped Hernandez. The man had manipulated him for years, forced him to do odd jobs, threatened him, groomed him to keep quiet. Then, for reasons I still can't fully piece together, Hernandez found out where I lived. Maybe I'd posted something on social media or told an old acquaintance who mentioned it to the wrong person. He used Rafi to track me down, sending him as a silent messenger. In the end, the cops took Rafi to a shelter. They never caught Hernandez. No record of him. No trace. The building's cameras were busted, conveniently, so no footage. It's like, he vanished. Answers, sure, but nothing that makes me feel safer. So I left 8th Street behind, gave up my deposit, took my battered Honda, and moved to a friend's place. People might say I ran away, but I don't see it that way. I saved my own life, maybe Rafi's too. That's my story, or as much as I can recall. I still have nightmares about that scrawled message, "We're still here." Sometimes I wonder if it means there are more of Hernandez's victims out there, people who never managed to escape, or if it means he's still out there, waiting. I carry pepper spray and a knife now, jump at random footsteps behind me, and for the first time, I truly realize how deeply fear can nestle into a person's bones. I'll never forget that feeling, of the door locking in the dark, or the cold press of my childhood caretaker's hand around my wrist. When I close my eyes at night, sometimes I see that boy's face, bruised and wide-eyed, and sometimes I see myself, a little girl who never got to truly leave the nightmares behind. That's the worst part, really, realizing that once someone worms their way into your fear, they can always come back. It doesn't matter how many years pass, how many blocks or states or towns you move away. If they want to find you, they will. And if they still have that twisted hunger for control, they'll stop at nothing to make sure you remember exactly who you are and how powerless you once felt. I'm learning how to cope, how to stand my ground. But the echoes of that place, that caretaker, that battered boy, they linger like a bitter aftertaste. I can still hear the alarm ringing in my ears, still picture Hernandez slipping into the night. Maybe the cops will nab him one day, or maybe he'll slip right back into the shadows like he's been doing his whole damn life. All I know is, if I ever catch a glimpse of those hollow eyes in a stairwell again, I'm not hesitating. I won't freeze. I won't be that frightened kid stuck in a storage closet. Because that's the lesson here. The real horror isn't some supernatural force. It's the evil that men like Hernandez carry inside them, the terror they inflict on people who are just trying to live. And once you taste that terror, you never really lose the memory of it, no matter how hard you try to bury it. I wish I could say that's the end, that it's all behind me. But I know better. Sometimes, the worst nightmares are the ones you keep inside, half forgotten. And sometimes those nightmares have a knack for showing up at your doorstep, reminding you exactly where you came from and what you left behind. That's my story. I'm still here at least. And I'm holding tight to the hope that one day, maybe I won't look over my shoulder every time I walk down a hallway. But for now, I do, because the echoes of 8th Street follow me everywhere I go. You made it to the end, but are you sure the story's over? Some things have a way of sticking with you, creeping back in when you least expect it. If you want more nightmares, there's another story waiting for you right here. But don't say I didn't warn you. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently? Or maybe the better question is, what would you do if this ever happened to you? Subscribe if you haven't already. Just don't blame me when you start sleeping with the lights on.